everybody, good evening. My name is Alan, and on behalf of the crew, I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Bridging Heaven and Earth. You know, for all of us who have our lives and have our experiences in our lives, we go through those experiences and we try to find love, we try to find truth, we try to find an experience that brings us true joy in this life. And we all are at this time coming into the experience where that love and that joy is really more available to us. And for all of us, for people who've seen the show before, you know we always talk about the oneness, dedicated to the oneness. And I got a few emails and calls this week and they said, what do you mean by the oneness? And to me, the oneness is the experience of the connectedness of all of us, of all things, that there is one energy that from which all comes from. And that is what people throughout history have called the Father, what people have called God, what people have called Brahman, or whatever the particular pronunciation in a sense of it. But what it is an experience of the all, that we're all part of the one and that we're all connected. And that's the experience. And when a human being has that experience, it feels like love, it feels like joy. And in that, the separation fades away and all that exists is the love and joy. And for us to all come together more and more and more into a collaboration of joy, of love, of playfulness on this planet Earth, to bring the glory of this planet and the glory of all of us into fruition. And now is the time for that. And with us tonight, we have somebody who travels the globe, trying to bring that experience, that spiritual experience, that experience of the one, of the connectedness, of the sense of us all, animals, all the peoples, being part of that whole, being in that fabric of the one. Kevin Peer is a world-renowned filmmaker and writer. He's been making documentary films for 20 years. His work has been seen by hundreds of millions of people. He was, his shows have been shown on National Geographics over and over again, all over the world. He has won 40 national and international awards. But the essence of Kevin and the reason he does this work is to visually bring that experience, with the visuals that he takes and the music he brings to it, to let people have that experience from people to people, from tree to animal, from dolphin to human. And that's what his dedication is, and that is what his life is about. And we're privileged that Kevin brought with him 3 different videos tonight that bring that experience, that bring that inspiration, that bring that love with him and to us tonight. And he's just a beautiful being who has been gifted with the talent to make videos and make visuals that touch the heart. So we're honored to have Kevin with us tonight and some extraordinary videos. So whatever you've done today, as I normally say, settle in, relax. Please join us tonight, Kevin and I and the crew here, in letting heaven come to all of us more and more. So as we normally do, please join me in a short meditation just to settle into that experience. If you don't know how to do a meditation, just follow your breath, or just relax. Just settle into your chair, just relax, take a few deep breaths, and then we have an extraordinary show for you tonight. So please join me. Thank you. So we're going to start tonight with one of Kevin's videos just to get you a feel for what Kevin's work is like. It's an animal nature montage, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And then when we're done with that, Kevin will be on the set and we'll get to know Kevin. So thank you. Hi, welcome. Well, we're with Kevin on the set. Welcome, Kevin. It's great to have you here.
Wonderful to be here.
So how did you, as a young man, find yourself getting into that avenue of expressing your love and your inspiration?
It actually came as kind of a gradual evolution. I've always been very much in love with the natural world. I've always felt a very strong connection with the natural world. And I grew up basically in the suburbs of Illinois, in the suburbs of Chicago, and then we moved a little bit further and further out into the countryside. But it seemed like no matter how suburban my circumstances, I was always gravitating towards that vacant lot or that patch of woods that hadn't been developed yet. So I knew early on that I wanted to do something connected with the natural world, and it was actually after our family moved down to Miami, Florida. When I was a teenager, I started going out into the Everglades quite a bit and felt this extraordinary connection with that vast, dangerous, beautiful swamp, marshland out there. And was experiencing extraordinary things out there, but then would also see how quickly it was being destroyed. And so the pain that I experienced, that I suffered by seeing the destruction of that place, really compelled me to try to do something. And I used to be a cartoonist when I was in junior high and high school and thought about becoming a political cartoonist, but then I started doing photography because I was recording the different life forms out in the Everglades. And so I went and studied at the Virginia Polytechnic Institute, State University in Blacksburg, Virginia. I thought I wanted to become a wildlife biologist, but I found out within about a year and a half that the scientific view of the world, the resource management view of the world, of looking at trees as board feet of timber, of looking at wildlife as harvestable units of fish or deer, etc., was just so far off from where my values were. And through kind of a remarkable series of circumstances, I got drawn into filmmaking. It was actually a professor of psychology who had befriended me because he had bought some of my photographs from an exhibition. And he said, well, you love music and you love photography and you love to write and everything, why don't you make films? And it was like, bing! So
right from the first time you said it, it just...
it was perfect.
A gong went off in your head.
Yeah, Joseph Germana, thank you very much. And so I took a little back then, before video and everything, was an 8mm filmmaking class, and what I made was, embarrassingly primitive and crude, but actually got put on the local cable channel there. And
that's what they say about this show quite often.
No, this is a high-class operation here.
No, I understand.
But it was just enough to experience the magic of that combination of images and music. And it was bigger than me, right from the start. When I looked at it, I remember looking at it and going, and not because the work was so great, but because it had tapped into something that was bigger than me. And so that just became a path that I followed. And doors opened up, and
I mean, it was like right away there was wind in your sails.
Yeah.
I mean, right away it just felt like this, and to this day. And you're involved now with a new concept that you're trying to get funding for, the Tree of Life. Why don't you explain, what you're doing with that?
I've, like so many of us, I think, have felt a strong connection with trees all of my life. And I'm sure that most of the people out in the audience, if they thought about it, they would have a tree story to tell. Some tree in their childhood that became the tree, the character that they went and talked to and found solace. Or there's a tree in a place called Twin Lakes, this little pond in Illinois that I used to go to. It was a couple blocks from my home, and it was a willow tree that overhung the pond, and I would climb up in there. When I was feeling great, or I'd climb up in there when I was feeling like nobody in the world understood me, and somehow that tree understood me. And I would sit there and I'd watch the bass and the different fish down in the water there, and everything made sense in that tree. And had to walk through a forest, an oak forest, to get to it. So living in different parts of the country, and especially in the Pacific Northwest, where I saw tremendous destruction of the forest, of the temperate rainforest up there, and the old growth forest, I started to educate myself about people's relationship with trees, because I was trying to understand, how can I represent to the media, because I was doing a lot of that, how can I represent to the media this conflict that's going on? Because it's always been portrayed as tree huggers versus loggers, as the rough guys who don't shave with the the effeminate New Agers. And that was so
that
far
way you
off.
don't shave, so you
Huh?
can bridge the gap.
Well, sometimes I do. It depends on which side I want to, appear on.
Right.
Yeah.
Which side of the set you want to come up.
Right. But, I would go to a lot of the protests that were going on, and it was everybody from, kids with dreadlocks and bongo drums to a friend of mine who took a kryptonite bicycle lock to, she was 67 years old, psychologist, PhD, took a bicycle lock, put it around her neck, and attached herself to the back of a logging truck that had just been stopped. And in experiencing those things, a passion that went all across the board. And likewise, the misunderstanding that the people who were who were on the ground in the logging industry, not the timber companies who had their own more corporate agenda, but the people whose livelihood had depended on that. I realized that my approach was going to have to be much more sophisticated than good guys and bad guys and trees versus people. And so in doing this research, I found this wealth of mythology about humankind's relationship with trees that existed since the beginning. Whether we came from the Pleiades or whether we came from the trees, we've had a relationship with trees. And trees have been the central icons of most of the world's religions, whether it's the Bodhi tree in which the Buddha attained enlightenment, or the Christian tree of life, and the tree of the knowledge, good and evil, or the Kabbalistic tree in Judaism. And the stories go on and on and on when you look at indigenous cultures and the relationship that they've had with trees. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Constitution was based partly on an inspiration from the Iroquois nation, and their central image was the tree. And so I realized that I wanted to make a film that was addressing what I wasn't seeing done in any other film that dealt with humankind's relationship with forests and trees and the issues of deforestation. And so the name of the project is In Search of the Tree of Life, and it's going to be kind of an odyssey of traveling around the world and looking very heartfully, but hopefully in a very clear-eyed way, at all the different faces of this relationship. From the gold mines in the Amazon, where the forests are just being slaughtered, to places in Africa and India in particular, where they're still worshipped either in their own right or as the abode of the gods, goddesses. And using that relationship, or those different aspects or different faces of the relationship, as a way of looking at human culture, as a way of looking at the evolution of human civilization. This realm of industrialized forestry and everything that we're seeing today, the rape, the pillage of the earth on such a wide scale, is a really pretty recent phenomenon. I mean, elements of it have always existed wherever there's been the movement of civilization, but the scale of it and this sort of heartlessness of it is something that's very recent. And there's a mythology behind that. There's a set of assumptions that are behind that have power, that guide people. So
and there are assumptions, and there's increased technology. Would you say both of them exist?
Yes.
In other words, you can cut it down faster. You got machines that go wah,
Yeah.
So, but what is the mythology? Why is there a heartlessness? Why is there this separation now between the tree and I? That I can cut the tree down and it doesn't matter.
Well, it's kind of a long story, but a lot of that takes place in Europe, in the evolution of Europe, or even it goes back to Aristotle and Plato and the changes that were taking place there, where there was starting to be a perceived distinction between I and thou. I think, therefore I am. I mean, earlier on, when you read some of Plato and Aristotle, there was starting to be a feeling that it was actually good not to identify so much with the natural world, that it was more honorable. It's like the thought process was starting to, the thought process that leads to the distinction of I versus the outside world was starting to come to life. It was like a process that really hadn't been part of human consciousness very much before. But something about that part of the world, it was, I guess, meant to be, but that started to take on a life of its own. And then when that thought process combined with Christianity, it started to take a particular form in Europe that started further and further and further to separate.
To create the separation.
And to view the natural world as a place that was fallen from grace, because when Adam and Eve fell from grace, the earth fell with them.
So that anything we do in that regard, we're not connected to.
Right.
So we can do as we wish.
Exactly, no consequences.
No consequences.
Yeah,
Wow.
and of course there's that particular reading in Genesis of, you know, thou shalt multiply and spread over the earth and subdue the earth. And I myself think that's a unfortunate translation.
Yeah, I would say it's an unfortunate translation.
Yeah.
There isn't an experience of the love. That would be
Right.
the connectedness of it all.
Yeah, but because of the other forces that were in play, that just
I
lit
see
the
almost
fire.
that turning around, you know, with people like shows like this and people like you, and just the media almost seems more open to it. But why don't we set the stage? We're going to show the Master Archer video. So why don't you just give like a short opening to it, and then we'll show it, and then we'll come back and talk about, you know, how all these things connect.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to do that.
Whatever you did, I don't know what you're supposed to do with it.
There's somebody back there going like this, and I thought it was a symbol
We're always doing some
oneness
spiritual thing.
Back in the 80s, I had the honor of working for National Geographic Explorer. I was actually the first producer they hired on that series. I was a kid of like 27 at the time. And so a couple of years, I was on staff for about 4 years as a producer, director, cameraman. And about 2 years into my stint there, I had the extraordinary honor of making a film on a man named Kojiro Shibata, who is 20th generation samurai, comes from an ancient lineage of samurai families in Kyoto. And for the past 20 generations, his family had held the title of archer and bow maker to the Emperor of Japan. And in Japan, archery was, until the Portuguese introduced firearms in the 15th century, the bow was the premier long-distance weapon. And there's extraordinary legends of what they were able to do, you know, shooting geese out of sky and you know, putting arrows through boats and that sort of thing because of the power of the bows that they had. But there was a whole, and when Zen came over from China, it combined with all of the martial arts so that whatever your martial art was
to have that.
It became
a Zen.
Yeah, it became
training.
a spiritual training,
Right.
And so then this man came from that tradition, and because archery had become a more competitive sport in Japan, he found that there was a more receptive audience in the West for learning the contemplative aspects of it, and so I spent about a week and a half there, and did some studying with him. I'm a pretty steady practitioner of Zen archery now, but. I took part in watching a workshop, observing and filming a workshop that was going on at a Buddhist meditation center in Vermont, and so that's what this what this is about.
Let's view it.
This is Karmacholing, a center of Buddhist learning in rural Vermont. People come here from all over the country and from all walks of life to practice a variety of ancient meditative techniques. These men and women have come to learn Kyudo, the way of the bow.
Hey, Yumi, left, hand up,
Kanjuro Shibata is a master or sensei of Kyudo.
push 6%.
He came to the United States from Japan in 1985, hoping that the Eastern discipline, which is sometimes called Zen archery, would find a receptive audience in the West. On the surface, Kyudo seems to resemble the Western sport of archery,
balance,
where points are scored each time the arrow hits the target. But for Sensei, the bullseye is unimportant. The target is one's mind.
彼の修行は
In
と
Kyudo,
ても厳しい。
the archer confronts his inner self because
掴むより
the bow is so difficult to
10
master.
年間
He learns, above all, to be patient. They say that
後で
Zen monks had to sit on a stone for 10 years before they could even start to understand anything. In Kyudo, it takes 10 years to learn how to grip the bow
手
properly.
のうち10年。
As early as the 8th century, the Japanese nobility recognized archery as a way to develop self-discipline. Later, when Japan was convulsed by a series of civil wars, an emerging warrior class known as samurai regarded the bow as a superior fighting tool. Using it correctly became an art. After the teachings of Zen Buddhism reached Japan, the martial arts gradually took on a new emphasis. The Zen warrior's primary goal was to purify heart and mind, and thus become fearless in battle. Sensei is 20th generation samurai. For the past century, his family has held the title of official bowmaker and archer for the Emperor of Japan. In his Kyoto workshop, Sensei forms the bows, or yumis, from a series of bamboo and hardwood laminates, sometimes using wood cut by his great-great-grandfather. The bows are between 6 and 7 feet long and can take up to 10 years to make. According to samurai tradition, bows crafted by masters like Sensei contain the spirit and consciousness, the essence of their creator.
弓はね、
The yumi is not only something used to throw an
心
arrow.
を作る
It is a tool to cleanse one's mind.
自分の
The
心
yumi itself is the teacher.
According to an ancient Zen saying, a man discovers his true character at the moment of the arrow's release. Every movement in Kyudo is a meditation. He who masters the bow masters himself.
In China, in the old days, the emperor tested people by having them shoot the bow. It was a way of measuring a man's personality, his state of mind. If he used the bow properly, if the arrow was released with dignity, he could be trusted.
The essence of Kyudo is balance, inner and outer. Balance is achieved by mastering the 7 coordinations of Kyudo, from the initial stance
This cross,
to the final pause after the arrow is released.
touch, fast, push,
These are beginners,
big back,
using the bow for the first time.
push, pull. Kai. Oh my. Why?
For Sensei, there are no mistakes. At this stage, reflection on technique is the most important thing.
This, body, shoulder, cross. Yumi, yeah, cross.
The legs are planted firmly, like a tree rooted solidly in the earth.
Slowly, slowly, slowly.
The upper torso feels uplifted, as if attached to a string in the sky.
Twist, little bit, twist. Hi, fast, push. Big large, big large, big large. Hi, stop. Heaven glass. Okay, correct.
When the arrow is finally released, it is not the result of a conscious decision, but when the moment is right, like a piece of fruit falling naturally to the ground. One of Kyudo's most difficult concepts for Westerners is the relative unimportance of the target. Sensei's students start by shooting at a bale of hay a single bow length away. Then, usually within 3 months, they take aim at more distant targets, following instructions similar to those transmitted to samurai warriors centuries ago.
For me, I think the mind that Kyudo develops is one of awareness and present moment. You can be in a very confusing situation and not be carried away by all that, and able to see what's going on and be appropriate in the situation.
My mind is always working. It's always thinking. It's always thinking about things that happened before and hoping they'll happen again, or worrying about things that are going to happen in the future. And that's very confusing. We try to be, I try to be on the spot. When you're doing Kyudo, you've got this enormously impossible form. Your hands, every particular movement that you do with your hands, your body, your eyes are prescribed. And yet there are things that are going on in your mind. I'm balancing my checkbook, I'm standing up there and reliving an argument I just had. I'm furiously angry. I'm worried about money. It's difficult to let go of those. And all of a sudden you get up there and you're at balance and you're thinking and you're thinking and you're still thinking, and then you let go. That release is so powerful, it's so strong, it's so physical with your yell that it just snaps you back to, I'm here, and all that stuff is meaningless.
Finish. Basta. Sit down.
The spirit of Kyudo is to treat oneself with discipline and others with kindness. It comes from inside, after long practice with the bow. Kyudo starts with spirit and ends with spirit. A master does not try to hit the target. He does not even hope to do that. But if he has a good heart, if his spirit is correct, he will hit the target even if he is blind.
Wow, that was beautiful. Yeah, that was beautiful. So it would seem to me that there's a difficulty in showing like the spiritual path, which is an internal thing, in a visual way. How do you try to bridge heaven and earth, as they say, that way?
By trying to find imagery that has a mythic quality to it. You know, mythic storytelling and mythic image making. Myth is like the use of language that is able to provide that bridge. There's just something archaic, archetypal, probably something that's related to our genetic structure, you know, that's why the classic heroes myth has so much resonance with us and has for thousands of years. I was in the Sahara Desert several months ago and living with some nomads, and we were just in the middle of the Sahara Desert, sitting there went over with Leslie Clark, who has a nomad gallery in Ojai, and sitting around there in the sand dunes, telling stories, listening to the Tuareg, who had been born and raised in the desert, telling stories. And what were the stories? They were hero's journey stories. Now, they're often very funny and sort of a little bit racy, but they're all hero's journey stories. Thousands of years old, these stories. So the way that that's done is by trying to find the stories and trying to find the imagery that provides that bridge, and then using language as little as possible, or using language in a very deliberate way to where it hopefully does not interfere with that at all.
So in other words, it's like trying to find like that common lineage that we all have, and visually bring that to people's attention. And you're starting to do that. I mean, work with the bow and have that experience. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and what? So was that the first time you saw it happening?
Yes.
And you've been interested in it ever since, more or less. But you just got a bow.
Yeah, I just made that because they're a little bit expensive, and so several $100s for a bow, and then that special glove that you have to have, and the ya, the arrows, and so it's. I didn't want to be what Sensei calls a 3-day monk, you know, where you get all your equipment and you're all excited, and then you practice for, you know, a week or a couple of weeks or something, and then it's.
You see it up on eBay.
Yeah, it's right.
Sensei's sword for sale.
Yeah, that's off
barely used.
Off to the next thing, you know,
Right.
off to the next path to enlightenment. So I really didn't want to do that. Sensei led me through the instruction on the 7 coordinations when I was there, and I'll never forget the first shot that I took. And it was after the workshop and the filming was over and the crew had gone back, and I was actually staying in Vermont for about another week. And so I, you know, pushed and pushed and pulled, and when you do Kyudo, there's a very specific balance of forces that's going on. You do imagine energetically, feel yourself rooted into the ground like an oak tree, and then like a string is attached to your head, so that there's sort of a force that's going up this way, and then you're pushing with one arm and pulling with another, and when you're at what they call kai, then all of those forces are balanced. And when there's a release, then there's actually kind of a projection of energy out in this direction, and your hand going like this, and then your other hand going back. And it's kind of difficult to explain, but there's kind of this, at times, this kind of explosion of energy that happens in all directions. It's kind of a shock to the system, and I almost blacked out.
Wow.
And I mean, it was probably because I wasn't breathing right or something, but it did have a profound effect on me. And actually kind of scared me from it for a while, because I didn't feel quite equal to the experience in terms of the discipline that I would have to really incorporate this into my life. And working for National Geographic, I was always gone in one country or the other, and didn't probably be. My neighbors in my apartment building might have not have wanted me to put a hay bale up in the hallway there. So it was some years later and more contact with Sensei that I kind of fell in love with it, where I realized that I didn't want to live without doing this. And it felt very natural to kind of gravitate in that direction, and then to get my equipment, and then to be practicing in that way. So it's there's a real yoga to it. As I said, the balance of these different forces. There's a tremendous amount of mindfulness that's required, in the sense that you have to be aware of how you're holding the bow and how you're pulling back and how you're standing. And one time I remember shooting, and I wasn't really trying to aim at the target, but the arrow went right into the middle of the target. Well, you're supposed to just let that go, there's no such thing as a bad shot or a good shot in Kyudo, but there's a little part of me that went,
You the man.
yeah, that was a good shot.
Right.
I mean, you know, and people were kind of looking at me, and it's like, I'm pretty new at this, and damn,
The next
that was
one, you
a-
shot yourself in the foot, however.
Well, what happened was the next shot, so I had the, it was called a 2-ya form, so I had the other ya there, and so I got up and went through the form, and I'm saying, Kevin, be modest now, just let that go. But damn, that was a good shot. And I pulled it back, and I'm holding, and I released the arrow, and the bowstring caught my glasses and ripped them off, and disfigured my glasses, tore them off of my face, and they went into the snow. And that's what
You were humbled almost immediately.
Yeah, I was the man,
big
all right.
mouth and the ego just
I was
got
the-
whacked.
I was the chump.
Right.
And that's what Kyudo is like. It's like having, when Sensei said the Yumi is the teacher, the bow is the teacher, it really is. And when I first got this bow, I was kind of excited, and it was sort of preoccupied with the fact that here was this beautiful new Yumi, because they're 7 feet long and they're just gorgeous to look at. And the first shot, I wasn't mindful. I was paying attention to these other things, and the bowstring came down and just tore off a couple layers of skin on my forearm.
I could imagine.
And it isn't always so brutal, but there is this extraordinary way that the way the shot happens is usually an amplification of whatever is happening in mind.
Yeah.
And so it's really a very powerful, very relevant practice. I find that when I've been practicing, that I really do carry that awareness with me in everyday life. It's not something you just sort of leave behind and then...
Well, being in the moment feeds
Yeah.
itself. So whatever, technique or tool you use to, come in and be there and be alive and be conscious, if you build up a momentum.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty
Good way
of
of putting it, yeah.
So we're also going to show this little piece now of you in Africa with the Wodaabe. And you have a sense in the way of the Wodaabe. Why don't you just set it up for everybody?
Okay, this next piece will be, it's a little compilation of 2 different sequences that are part of a larger film that's called Way of the Wodaabe that I did for National Geographic back in 1988.
88,
Yeah,
wow.
way back.
Wow.
And so 12 years ago or so, I was with the Wodaabe, and they're a tribe in the country.
But you go back there all...
Yeah, I went back this last year,
Right.
And the Wodaabe are this tribe of about 40,000 who live in Niger and Nigeria. Niger, sometimes people call it Niger. And it's north of Nigeria and south of Libya and south of Algeria and east of Chad, west of Chad, rather. The Wodaabe are an extraordinarily intact group, tribal group. And I'm very happy to say that extremely little had changed in the 12 years that I had been gone when I went back. But I really fell in love with them. I mean, I think maybe we'll get just a little bit of sense, at least their physical beauty and their charm. And so these pieces are part of what they call the yake dance and the Gerowo dance. And there are 2 courtship dances that they do in late October, depending on where the rainy season is. It's at the end of the rainy season. And the men dress up in these beautiful garments and put on this, what we would call makeup. And oftentimes when I say that I did this film on the Wodaabe, people say, oh yeah, those are the guys who dress up like girls. It's like, well, no, they're not dressing up like girls. They're dressing up like beautiful Wodaabe men.
Right.
They're lightening their skin, they're using certain lines of makeup to accentuate the features that are really considered erotic or attention-getting to them. And what happens is the men will stand in a line, actually like 30 yards away, from quite a distance away, really, from this line of women and other observers, elders and everything. But primarily the women are the ones that they're focusing on. And from that distance, they will be looking and making eye contact and doing these very subtle subtle communication between each other that you or I, looking, would never guess was going on. And what they're saying is, I like you, you're charming, thank you, you're beautiful, and let's meet over there at about an hour and a half after the sunset and get together.
Wow.
And so when you see when you see this footage, that's what's going on. That communication.
Okay, well, let's watch
is
it,
going
and then we'll
on.
talk about the Wodaabe way and their integrity and things like that.
Okay.
So.
For 51 weeks of the year, they eke out a living on a parched strip of land in the African Sahel. In the 52nd week, they dance. They call themselves the Wodaabe, people of the taboo. Niger, West Africa, the Wodaabe's ancestral home. To the north lies the Sahara Desert. To the south, the fertile grasslands of Nigeria. For centuries, Wodaabe life has revolved around cattle. Every few days, they must move their herds to new sources of water and forage, covering as much as 1,000 miles in a single year. In the best of times, the survival of these 45,000 nomads is precarious. And 3 years ago, they were hit by a drought that almost destroyed their way of life forever. Macau has seen 40 dry seasons come and go, but nothing like the winter of 1985.
Our animals died. We were destitute. We searched everywhere for our cattle. We would see the horns and skulls of our cattle lying in the sand, and hoping they were alive, we would call out to them, "Get up, get up." But the cattle were dead. Only the bones were left.
All over camp, the evening fires are lit to calm the cattle. For the first time in months, the air isn't filled with insects, a sign that the dry season has already begun. Preparations for the second dance begin, the sacred dance of physical beauty called the Garnered. In the Garnered, charm and personality are not important. The dancers will be judged on the basis of beauty alone. Only the most handsome men dare to compete. Normally, the Garnered would be danced throughout the night, but even with the afternoon rains, drinking water is in short supply, and the elders call a halt to the dancing shortly before midnight. But for dancers and observers alike, a vital link with their life before the drought has been re-established. They are beginning to be Wodaabe once again.
Wow, that was fantastic. So I've spoken to you about this before, and there's a certain integrity that they live by. Why don't you talk about that? Maybe a few people in the United States could use a little information on that.
Well, it's something that's really unique about the Wodaabe that certainly keeps drawing me back to them, because they really are. They're not only great friends of mine, but they're teachers. And that is that they base their life on something called the Wodaabe way. They're not, although they kind of call themselves Muslim because they're in a Muslim country, they don't really practice Islam. except I would say in the better parts of Islam, the part where you take care of each other, etc. But their religion is the ways of their ancestors, the Wodaabe way, and it's made up of Munyal, Togu, and Semtende, and all that together is what they call Hankale. And Munyal is loyalty and patience, and a certain kind of perseverance and fortitude in the face of hardship. And Semtende is the capacity for remorse and self-reflection and humility. And Togu is what these guys are doing here, you know, dancing and
joy.
Charisma and joy, and the ability to have one's presence be a source of enjoyment for other people. So, I mean, the Wodaabe men and the women are some of the most charming, extraordinary, charismatic people that I've ever seen. But they don't do it for themselves individually. I mean, it will bring them a wife or a husband, for instance, but it's not something that they do to aggrandize themselves. It's something that they do because it gives pleasure to, you know, it's part of a whole. Nothing is seen separate from the whole. So those qualities that I talked about are the basis of what it is to be Wodaabe. And so if somebody had great, and then that's called, if you have all of those things, then you have hankale, you have intelligence. So here, a person could be very, very clever and be considered extremely intelligent, but terribly selfish or whatever. Well, the Wodaabe, that person wouldn't be considered intelligent. They would be considered clever, but not intelligent. To be a Wodaabe is to have Munyal, Semtende, and Togu, and they all do. And if one is rude and is selfish and is boring and everything, well, you're not Wodaabe. And it's something that they're raised with from the time that they emerge from the womb, and so it's all that they know. And but they also know, they're very conscious of the fact that this is why they have a good life. Physically, it's very difficult and it's very precarious because of droughts.
And the heat is unbearable.
Yeah, 120 degrees when I was there. But the Wodaabe, when they say, why are you, they say, we're the happiest people in the world. They say, why are you the happiest people in the world? Because of the Wodaabe way. We're happy because, so it's this extraordinary consciousness about the benefits of creating harmonious situations in one's life by one's behavior. So whereas here we may head to the fundraiser and yell and scream at somebody and, you know, on the way, to them it's every moment that's important. Every moment is an opportunity to practice the Wodaabe way. Yeah. So
they actually, like all the spiritual paths talk about, live in the moment more than. Oh yeah. I mean, that is in a sense the Wodaabe way, to be in that love and be in the moment.
Yeah, and they're the most present moment people that I've ever met. I would say that, and I've not spent a lot of time with a lot of other indigenous groups. I would say that present moment quality is common to a lot of groups. But what's unique about the Wodaabe is that during the whole time that I was there was hardly any mention of the future or the past, and no mention of what happens after death. And they don't take their physical suffering or the unknowns that they deal with in their life, the uncertainty in terms of the physical uncertainty of whether the rains are going to come and everything, and appeal to the gods. They just say, well, they will say, well, that's Allah's will. And then the rest is absolutely up to them. So I'm in the process of writing a book.
The way of the Wodaabe. Yeah. Now we saw 3 clips tonight. We saw the animal nature montage. We saw the master archer, and then we saw the Wodaabe way. What would you say is like the defining connecting point? I mean, what is the heart that pulls all of those together? And, makes you go out there and want to do it again?
I think it's that desire to show. To show the unseen world, to show that realm of what we call spirit or presentness or mindfulness or whatever, and to use whatever abilities and gifts that I have, and whatever abilities I can continue to nurture and develop, and to make these sorts of films that communicate that, because I find that people really respond to it, because we all want to experience more oneness. We all want to experience more, less aloneness. The Wodaabe are never alone. They don't know what loneliness is. We live with it all the time. We live with this extraordinary fragmentation. And so I would like to use this medium, the mediums of writing and the mediums of filmmaking in particular, to help to bridge those worlds and to dissolve some of that fragmentation and to bring us back into, help us to be back in more of a natural state.
And do you find that there seems to be a larger and larger audience for that, that places where, you know, outlets are large, like National Geographic's, the Discovery Channel, that they're looking for this kind of thing, they feel drawn to it, that they want more product like that?
You know, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Yeah,
either.
I mean, actually, Geographic and I have
they
more
rather
experience
see
with
tiger
them.
fights.
Yeah, they're kind of in the more commercial. They become. I feel very fortunate to have been with Geographic at the time that I was, because we were just a bunch of kids,
right?
and we were just experimenting
right.
with it, and whatever seemed interesting and compelling and everything, that's what we're going to do. But now it's got to be
points and
it's got to be, and it's. So I think they kind of lost their soul
so
for the time being.
So your films would have to be almost like independently released and things like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's why I decided to, although I think I could find a venue for the Tree of Life film to do that in some fashion, I'm not willing to compromise the idea and the things that I want to bring forth in order to get money quickly from.
So that's why you're applying for grants from organizations?
Grants, individual donations, etc.
Rather than going to a Discovery Channel or National Geographic, which would end up, in a sense, maybe debasing it or making
it what they felt that the audience would want to see and would respond to and would want to tune into. So.
Wow. All right, so I guess once again, you know, the show's winding to an end. I did want to say, of course, I want to thank Kevin for coming here and bringing all his videos, but I also wanted to thank all of you. I mean, we've been getting recently just so many letters and cards and emails about, you know, how much the show means to them and the areas where it's going to be on very soon. We're getting it on, it looks like, in Boston and Atlanta. People are working on it in Chicago. So all your inspiration and all your love really affects, you know, myself and the crew and for us and all the guests that come on. And so keep checking the website, keep writing us. We love you. Please stay in the love. Thank you very much. Good night. God bless you.